Hey gang, a while back I promised that I was going to do a demo of Julia Baily, Wild West Bounty Hunter, fighting a major foe in the Bookmark No HP RPG rules. You may also recall that I set up the Wild West genre as a challenge to myself because I'm not used to running in the Wild West, and that I was having some trouble getting into the spirit of it. I tend to play either horror or fantasy or science fiction. Since that time, though, Eric Miller has designed a system for running kind of mini campaigns with GMA, Oracle deck, and a pen and maybe scrap of paper. He set this up as something that he could just stick in his pocket while traveling, break it out at any point, continue where he left off, and keep a sort of record of the mini campaign using the cards themselves. So I'm going to show you how to do that today as we set up Julia Baily to meet a gunslinger in town. So let's look at this HandiQuest system. He usually uses a location, like in this case, the back room. And this is the MacGuffin that you are heading toward for the adventure. Now, for today, I picked for this NPC, I went through and found some cards that have weapons on them in the belongings to represent this particular NPC. And my options here, this one just says tools or weapons. Here's an assassin's weapon, military weapons, hunting weapons, a ceremonial weapon, or an illegal weapon. The one that I think might best fit the genre is either military weapons, because so many of the pistols in the Wild West were Colt revolvers issued to Confederate soldiers, or an assassin's weapon. Now, the way that the HandiQuest system works is whatever you choose, you look at the difficulty on the back side. And so this would be the attack value of the NPC. Now, you may recall I tend to use difficulty 5 for heroes. The original game rules suggest 4 for human beings, so I bumped them up 1. Which means, in this case, that the military weapon on the back side is a 3, which strikes me as a little low, but I may come back to that one. Illegal weapon, that's a difficulty 7. That is going to be too much for Julia at this stage in her life. Ceremonial weapon, difficulty 5. That's a decent possibility. Hunting weapon, difficulty 5. Another decent possibility. Assassin's weapon, difficulty 7. That's going to be too high. And tools or weapons, difficulty 7. So we're going to shuffle those into the deck. And I think that given these, it'll probably be a best demo if I give this Gunslinger only a difficulty 3. So that gives us military weapons, which, as I said, fits the idea of the Old West. All right. So for the HandiQuest deck, the HandiQuest cards themselves, I should say, it's intended that you're going to play through at least half of the deck. So normally, you would take the back half, you turn your target card upside down so that when you run into it in the back half, you'll know, obviously, that that's it. Today's demo, I'm going to cut that down to about a little over a quarter of the deck so we don't go through this forever. I should say that part of the reason for putting it in the back of the deck is that when you're using this without dice, you're burning through a lot of cards with the GMA dice wheel. And if you're not familiar with that dice wheel, let me pull it up where you can see it. It's this thing right here. The shape tells you what die you've rolled. The number tells you what you've rolled on it. So in this case, a D4, I got a 2. If I were using this card as a D6, I got a 4. If I were using it as a D20, I rolled a 20. And these are for percentile dice over here, so a 50 and 6. If you haven't seen GMA cards before, I should probably cover the other things on them really quickly. Here's the standard Oracle thing of what are the odds of something happening? What are the odds that the door is unlocked? I think in this case they're good. Draw a random card. In this case it says, yes, the door is unlocked. There are words here, verb, adjective, and a noun, so that you can put like 3 cards together and say, take unholy wilderness. And then I'd try to come up with some explanation of what that means. Maybe choosing a path through a cursed wood, for example. Other things on this: sensory details, hearing, sight, touch, scent, the belongings I mentioned, catalyst we'll get into, location I mentioned. Here are names for an NPC that you might run into, what that NPC's primary virtue is, and what their vice is. And then other things on the deck. There are runes up here in this corner, elemental symbols below, so this is Earth. There are 3 other sort of tarot-shaped things, so death, the moon, and a shield. And then this is a directional arrow over here. You're using this for modern games, maybe which direction a grenade goes off target. Okay, so I can actually set this part of the deck aside, given that this is what we'll be using. And stick this in upside down. This is our Gunslinger. Shuffle it in. All right. So when we left off, Julia had faced down a bear and a gang of bandits and had left those encounters fairly wounded. Now I'm going to assume that in the intervening time, she has managed to maybe get to a little town and rest up, maybe do a little manual labor in exchange for some place to stay, because I assume that she doesn't have a lot of money to spend. Oh, actually, she had pilfered the bodies of the bandits, so no problem. She goes into town, she goes to see the doc, she takes up a room in a boarding house and heals up and goes on her way. So this, if you haven't seen it before, these are the character sheets that I tend to use with pencil. In this case, I've done ink so that you can see the details easily enough with this camera. The only problem is that using ink, I'm going to run out of space to take notes pretty quickly, whereas pencil works better, obviously. And you can find these things for sale on lestersmith.com if you are so inclined. For today, though, I've written it out on a piece of paper, which gives me some room to take notes. All right. So here we go. Using the HandiQuest rules, the first thing you look at on the next card is a location for where you're headed next. My options are playground or on the back, underwater. Now, the next thing with this system is you look at the difficulty on the back side, and that's going to be the difficulty, in this case, 7, of getting to that location. Or we could have a difficulty 6 to head to underwater. And I'm more inclined to use playground, even though it is more difficult. All right, why is it a difficulty 7 to get to the playground? We need a catalyst. So the next card comes up with an apparent haunting or hit by a stray shot. Now, that sounds like something that fits our adventure premise here. So I'd say Julia is still in town, nice little town, and she's out walking the streets. There's a field next to the church where the local kids like to play. And obviously the weather is good if they're out there playing. She's just enjoying the breeze and the sun and the laughter of the children when a shot rings out. Julia goes running toward the sound to make sure the children are okay. And it's time for us to get a few more details for this scene. So what does she hear? Slurred speech, slow tap, tap, tap. Kind of like the idea of slurred speech. There's a drunk out there shooting up the street, just shooting off his pistol, being loud, but this has put the children in danger. Okay, next card. Let's find something out about this character who is in the street firing off his pistol. Well, as luck would have it, I noticed that our next card is the gunslinger that we were hoping for her to encounter. But I do want to use this card for something first. So it says for belongings, petty jewelry, costume, rings, glass beads, enamel bracelet. And I think it sounds like he's probably robbing one of the kids. And this being a Wild West setting, we might assume that it's a girl, but let's give the deck a chance to confirm that. So the next card, I think, will say that the odds are likely that it is a girl wearing some inexpensive jewelry that her parents got. Odds are good. Let's see what the card says. Yes. So this is a little lady. And here is our villain who almost got away. Now, I said his difficulty is a 3, which makes sense, especially with him being drunk. Today is not his lucky day, unless the dice rule otherwise. So his name is Chris, Malena, or Limbo. You know what? He calls himself Limbo, the Gunslinger. And give him some stats. Brawn, grace, will, wits, and we'll make him a starting character. Let's say he's not very smart, but is quick on the draw. We'll give him an 8 for brawn, will of 6, and a wits of 4. So Julia shouts, "Hey, knock it off. Those are just children." And he shouts back, "Oh, who's going to make me?" And then he sees her jaw clench as she comes marching angrily toward him. Now, I had originally given her for equipment just storytelling terms, a pony, a rifle, and a Bible. I'm not using these as traits that she can gamble, but instead just items for flavor. And I think I'm going to add a pistol that she got off of the robbers. Probably sold the rest of them in town, which would have gotten her a little bit more money. In fact, what are the odds that there was actually a bounty to be paid on those bandits? I think the odds are probably 50-50. Let's check the deck. So next card, 50-50. No, there was no bounty on them. So all she got out of that encounter was whatever cash they were carrying and their other gear, which she has sold in town to add to her funds for her travel. Obviously, the gunslinger isn't going to take this from anyone, especially a woman. Remember, it's Wild West. So, and I think he's drunk enough and stupid enough to turn his pistol toward her to try to scare her away. We know how well that's going to work. I think it's legitimate for her to draw her pistol in response and then for him to shoot. Partly because we need to get into combat with a major villain in order for this demo to be any good, right? All right. So we have his stats here, and when I say major villain, all that means is that the character has a full set of 4 stats. Unlike a common foe, like the bear in the previous video, or a minor foe, which just roll 1 die, like the bandits in the prior video. Having all of these stats means that the character can take damage for a lot longer. So if you're using this system as a game host, save these encounters with major foes for a climactic battle. You don't want every combat to be this involved, especially with multiple characters. It's going to be a little easier for us with just 2 on the table. All right, actions go simultaneously. Of course, he is going to use his grace of a D10. His difficulty against Julia is a 5. So 5 10-sided dice. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So he takes his shot. And I've got a fail, high 10. That reminds me, one other thing that I'm planning on doing in this combat is using a rule from the battle bookmark, which is that for every 1 you end up with on a dice roll, you are suffering a reduction somewhere in the same fashion as having lowest high die. I don't know, I'm tossing a lot of things out there about this system without a lot of explanation. But the rules are on a bookmark. If you're not familiar with it, it's easy enough to get familiar. All right, so he has a fail, which goes directly to that D10, and it's now down to a D8 in his grace. Julia winged him. She is going to use her will of D12 to not even flinch as she rolls. So he was a difficulty 3. She's going to be rolling 3 12-sided dice. And there we go. He got a success high 11. I didn't think he was going to beat his fail high 10, but she did. She got a success high 11. So not only does she take no damage from his shot, but he is low high die at the table. Her high is 12, his high is 10. He takes another reduction, which I think will reduce his wits to 0. Not that he had a lot of wits in the first place, obviously, to be threatening someone with his pistol while he's drunk off his ass. Okay, the next turn. I think we'll say that he's using his brawn of D8 to grit his teeth and hold up under the pain. And again, he's rolling 5 dice. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 D8s. And he got a fail, high 8. So the fail knocks that down to a 6. She is still rolling 3d12. and a success high 9. Once again, he is low high die at the table and takes another reduction to his dice. And in this case, I think his will has probably dropped as he's beginning to see the handwriting on the wall. So, drawing up his last bit of courage, he tries to take a more careful aim with that grace of D8. And got a success high 8, which means this goes back up to a 10. G 3, 12, success high 11, which means that he beat his success high 8, and he suffers another reduction. Well, given that his grace has gone back up, I think he'll stick this out one more time, remembering his reputation as a quick draw. And actually, as I think about it, he's going to gamble his reputation of gunslinger this turn to reduce that difficulty 5 to 2.5 rounded up is 3. So he's rolling 3d10 against her. Success high 8. Normally I wouldn't be recording these on 2 different pages, but since I've started that way, might as well play it out. So he got a success high 8, and she is rolling her 3d12. Success high 10. She's standing there unflinchingly, treating this like a duel. So even though he succeeded and took no damage to this, he's low high die at the table. And let's drop his brawn to a 4. Same thing, he'll gamble his gunslinger to have the difficulty of fighting her, and again using grace of D10. Need only 3. Might as well. Let's back out of the way. Fail, high 5. Doesn't look good for him. Here's hoping that she does well. Success, high 7. All right, he took damage to his grace again, is back down to a D8, and he is low high die at the table, and he failed, so he's lost gunslinger reputation. So the question is, where do we want to take that low high die reduction? And let's draw a card to see if he tries to run. I think the odds are good, don't you? Turn up the next card. Odds are good. No, he does not run. He's sticking it out. The fool. So he's back to rolling 5 8-sided dice. Fail high 4. So his grace is down to a D6. Meanwhile, he has rolled success high 12. That attribute, being already a 12, as high as it can go, means that she gains another boon. And he is low high die at the table. I think odds are good once again that he's going to try to run. Turn up the next card and see what it has to say. Yes, he tries to run. Does Julia let him go? I'm sitting here with a little bit of a moral dilemma as to whether she's hard-nosed enough to shoot again or not. And it occurs to me that there's no way she would shoot someone in the back, but she doesn't want to let him get away either. So she is going to race after him and try to tackle him to the ground. So here we go. She's rolling d12s. Oh, she got a fail, high 9. Her grace isn't that high, so I was using will, sort of thinking she was running on pure adrenaline and anger. So let's write down that reduction and then see how he did. Her 12 is down to a 10 until she has a chance to rest and heal up. That was a fail, high 9. He was trying to run using his grace is the highest thing he has left. So 5d6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fail, high 6. So his grace is down to a 4. And he rolled low, high die at the table. So he's going to take another point, but he gets to choose where. Let's take it to brawn. So obviously he's on the ground, and Julia did take some damage that time. I think this means that she tore her dress while tackling him. I think the odds are that he's not going to give up. He may have lost his reputation as a gunslinger, but I doubt he's going to let himself be wrestled to the ground by a woman if there's anything he can do about it. Let's see what the cards say. Next card. 4 odds that he runs, but yes, he does. Or at least he tries to. Let's see what happens. And I think we will have him roll will this time. Julia's down to a d10 as her best attribute, still will. So she's rolling 3. Success, high 9. No way he's not going to be low high die. 1d4, 2d4, 3d4, 4d4, and 5d4. I love these little prismatic. Well, there's a 4, another 4, another 4, a 3, and a 3. That's a success, high 4 on his part, which raises that attribute back to a d6. But he has the low high die at the table, and so he's going to have to take that damage somewhere. I'm going to say it's will. So he's scared as can be, but I can't imagine Julia letting him go. So I guess it's going to be a little bit more wrestling in the dusty street. Let's see what happens. He is back up to D6s. Two fails. I6. So this goes down to a 4. He has to take damage somewhere from that extra 1 because we're using that battle bookmark rule. And that takes his remaining 4 down to a 0. Wits are gone. His will is gone. He's got no grace left. She has him pinned. But let's see what effect this wrestling around has on her. She's at a D10. Can't imagine her not using that die rather than trying to raise something else. So here we go with 3D10, and I think she is going to stake her reputation as a bounty hunter to drop that in half to just 2 dice. Success, I10. So she has recovered her will. He's low high die at the table, but he's already at 0 on everything. So the question is whether this last reduction is going to kill him or not. And I think Julia's intention is to capture rather than kill. So odds are it won't kill him, but let's draw a card to... Next card in the deck. That it was not good odds that he would be killed. So to frame this question, did he die? I think the odds are bad, and no, he did not die. Okay, awesome. The sheriff or deputy sheriff or crowd of townsfolk, whatever, can come and haul him away to the jail while lifting her up out of the dirt and either chastising her for fighting a man physically or praising her for not letting him get away. Let's see if there was a bounty on him. I think, given that he was here in town, odds are bad. And the cards say no, there was not a bounty on him. So let's see what possessions he was carrying. And we'll use the back side of the next car. Plants, bulbs, vegetable seeds, modified crops. I think the best way to read that is that he had come into the town to the general store to get some supplies. What are the chances he stole them? He seems like a dumbass to me. So let's say the odds are good. And good odds. No, he did not steal them. All right, given that he bought the supplies and spent some money on whiskey in the local saloon, I doubt there's anything left as a reward for her beyond some of the ladies in town stitching up her dress and inviting her to a meal. And with that, it's probably time for Julia to leave town the next morning in her trail clothes with her finery packed away. And I think his pistol is probably better than Bandit's pistol that she had come into town with. So she would swap them out. And if I were hosting this adventure for players, I would count that as a boon. So let's add a boon to her character sheet. She is up to 5. One more boon, and she can trade it in for a trait. And again, if I were hosting this game for other people, I probably would just go ahead and give them that trait for their bravery and how well they handled the situation. And I think I can justify that here as thanks from the townsfolk as she heads out of town. I do believe it would be easy to justify the pastor and probably the owner of the general store to provide her with supplies and maybe a little bit of money. Definitely a blessing on her way. But let's see what the deck has to say. Odds are good. And it is yes. So I am going to go ahead and give her that 6th boon and spend them all to give her a trait of a pearl-handled and you see how I tend to write off the side of the page, but I'll clean this up before the next time I play, obvious. Okay, so there's an example of a player's character facing down a major foe. Though I made him a bit of a lightweight, still the dice were in her favor, and off she rides. Thanks very much for watching. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this. Check out some of the earlier videos to see how the Bookmark No HP RPG works beyond what you've seen here. And I hope to see you in the next video. Oh, and again, please like or comment, maybe even subscribe. Visit lustersmith.com and leave me a message on the Say Hi page contact form, just so I know that there are people out there actually enjoying these things, and I very much appreciate that. Thanks, and see you in the next video.